balance between black and Chinese bodies. The night on the state rolls out, once again representing the forgetting of history of interconnectedness between Chinese and black struggle that is ignored in the protest of both Akai Gurley and Peter Ling. We choose to affirm Afro-Asian and use this year's resolution to promote Chinese solidarity and black struggle in understanding that the roots of oppression lie in anti-black to the analyzing economy of protests that expose how Akai was posited as a criminal while Ling was weaponized against Gurley through the myth of minority. This is why we, some people, choose to affirm Afro-Asian black individuals need a unique form of politics that operates outside of the strictly illegal to challenge the white supremacy, or else we face the continuation of the white supremacy set of colonial state, the extermination of indigenous population, seizure of private residence, exploitation of marginalized people, brutality, dehumanization, and the premature death of people like Akai Gurley. Now the first argument here saying that we do not solve our impacts of the affirmative assumes that we're making spillover claims in the first place. Like he said in Carl, since we nothing we do in this space, the base is actually the balance doesn't mean that the actual method is put into performance, but rather they say that the method is a good idea, just like in traditional debates when you say that you should implement a hypothetical plan by the USFG action, that means that plan should go into action now that it's actually happening within the debate round. So their arguments about the private schools being at Kentucky in protest is still occurring right now. Does that mean that it's still a good idea to affirm Afro-Asian within the status quo? It's your job to just analyze whether we should affirm Afro-Asian or reject Afro-Asian. This is what this debate comes down to. Now the Ferguson evidence misses the vote of the affirmative. We're not just criticism. This was explicitly proven across it. We're saying that we should affirm Afro-Asian. This is the surface level understanding of our affirmative. Now their hotshot evidence is also the worst way of framing and viewing the affirmative. One, we are not pessimists and put away their AT black people file. Second is that this evidence is about healthcare, not even in the context of racial relations or white supremacist colonial state. In the first place, also we are not a state phobia argument. We redefine how the state operates and say we some people. This also takes out the key evidence or permanent evidence is also answered about the fact that we're not a form of pessimism. Also, we don't form from the state action. We reformulate how the state works. This is the top of the debate. When I said on the overview that we say that the USFG operates at the level of we some people, I'll do this more when I get to the primary debate, but I will win on the case of that Afro-Asians improve methodology, intellectual thought of black conversion has been centered on transnational solidarity with China at the center. WE Du Bois, one of the most prolific, improving theory of black conversion in the modern era, dedicated his life to the resident on the global scale to the theory of Afro-Asian. He dedicated his life to something more than any other African American. Robert F. Williams was black nationalist, revolutionary, who were Negroes with guns on exile, and Cuban dedicated his life to transnational liberation of people who come all over the world fighting for revolutionary change against U.S. Western imperialism. He and his wife may have moved their families to the PRC in 1965, where they lived among the upper circles. This is Afro-Asian. The debate brought operates to imagine the potential of our Afro-Asian to resolve global discriminatory bonds, intellectual engagement, and empirically spilled up, capturing all their policy good arguments. Richard Wright, one literary genius in the middle of the movement Afro-Asian after disillusionment among Pan-Africanism, Soviet communism, Swan Nelson, African liberation struggles. Even the Black Panther Party founded Huey P. Newton visited China's organization allowed to pragmatically correct the 10-step program that led to the free breakfast schools and the Bandung Conference led to Asian African nations around the world discussing issues of national sovereignty, liberation, and peaceful coexistence. This is Afro-Asian. Goes to the primary debate here. The primary debate who are one to see hooker evidence of which specifically said that black people need a unique form of politics and work outside of the strictly legal, because with the endless linear deadline parties in the status quo, it's almost impossible to embrace any form of democracy. This is the form of black fugitive political thought. A fugitive slave is that the framework is the performative act of fugitive slave act that brings people back to the slave plantation of the traditional debate and erases the legacy. We will thousand employers, so many more, $200 reward, ran away from the plantation to the plantax and decided to fight for liberation from Baltimore. Slave masters are losing profit. Well, the negative is losing ground. They can't predict where the state goes next, because the case of liberation of the affirmative endorsers are when they see hooker evidence proves that we should not be criminalized for becoming fugitives. To unjust code B, grassroots this at A. However, the implementation of a plan does not allow bottom-up approaches, or when they see hooker evidence is key for black politics. In the case of racial justice, their interpretation is a one-size-fits-all approach that's account for whites from CNA by the status quo. C, respectability politics is that black should not include that to change their behavior when challenging racism. The star 15 watched by people have to adapt to change behavior to avoid racism. Politics meant that black people could be changed there are persons respectively politics has been used as a tactic before people come to bikes that make some arguments is more typical of white people who didn't do much about the violent resolving the police were owned by law enforcement or activity doesn't care about people adapting to racism races that we would get or didn't to racism laws about people adapting to racism never gets anything in return. North Carolina return now to the counter-intimidation affirmative should radically reimagine American democracy in the USFG through process of substantially increasing economic and or diplomatic engagement with the PRC that allows for fusion by political thought there and interpret to us, but we don't know who there is. A, we some people is functionally the three merchants in DC came and started this argument and know they be the people who run into these contributions that we were about to determine the action in this case government the purpose acting on passive discipline and ongoing obligation of citizens to be actors and governments also focus on three branches of government created by the Constitution instead of the foundation upon which they rest in that century. B, engagement is the process of bringing forth within the goals by current realities before us South Tennessee. In 16, brothers and fathers, of course, that play their artificial production of actualities and political engagement as an employee, the political gesture of engaging with the impossible as a perfect condition of the possible, engaging the impossible as possible. Engagement is a commitment to bring forth and make it possible to before closed by present actuality. Sees engagement sees actuality in the case what is not yet. Now, the affirmative prepares the base to be more like ready than the negative. If not everybody, then the debate will become a part of the top-down policy-making structure, but everyone will always be citizens. We must be more inclusive of diverse perspectives in the debate. We prepare to face the real world and we must feel good about our affirmation. The negative over limits while our limited discussion allows for the contribution of diverse perspectives of the topic. Now, our affirm is also the rhetorical bridge between traditional and performance debate. We're regional affirmation of the resolution, competing interpretation, closing race at the bottom, where teams eventually say forget the resolution and reject the topic. topic now. The first argument, their definition is a round winner for the affirmative. In this debate, cross-sex proves that he doesn't even know the other ways which the USFG works, which is why we want our own definition. Hold them to this in cross-sex and the way in which their definition says usually the three mentions that they see, which means that we'll win this easily. Their resonant evidence is exactly what we're critiquing in the first place. It says that the way that resonant says that engagement is influencing other countries. We're saying that the way that we influence current countries right now is based on the white supremacists, so the colonial mentality, which means that we should challenge it in the first place. They said topical version of the affirmative, but there is no topical version of the affirmative. Hooker says that the seemingly innocently of dead bodies inside the need to be made. We want to remember, make it difficult, if not impossible, to engage in naive exercise in democratic hope. Also, topical version does adopt a white moderate view, constantly saying, I agree with the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with the amendment. This is worse than outright rejection and ignores the present-day tension as necessary projection that's king. In 63 Negroes, there are certainly by construction of freedom, is not the KKK or the white moderate, but who is more devoted to order than justice, who prefers the absence of tension, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your message. I'm understanding people who good wills, but we would have been, rejection. I heard him, I hope that the white moderate will feel and understand that America, understand that they'll say, no, they make this new ask bad argument, but new ask, I think TOC are to development, increase in research, and finding critical ways from the topic. One, there's no bright line for what determines what is a new affirmative. This is a new version, like we said before. 3 calls were read before in the debate, and the card that affirms our method affirmation was actually released that camp that they had access to for this entire year. 2, this feels negative critical thinking skills in order to come up with a competitive strategy. The affirmative. 3, this leads to negative side bias because the affirmative is always set to an old ass shot. 4, this incentivizes the team to have not had a racial standpoint of the affirmative. The part says name the system of white supremacy. 5, the alternative to not having a discussion of the affirmative and challenging the system of white supremacy sounds like perpetuates that white privilege. Now they say that also the affirmative is not just about challenging norms, it's about finding a unique form of black politics for individuals. And once again, the negative is a one-size fits all growth. The fact that they said that we are reliant on line by line is a white structure in and of itself is an ethical reason to reject them. Just because we do line by line doesn't mean we're embracing white norms. Line by line is literally answering their arguments. That's a misconception of what we're doing. They read this cyber freely evidence, but this is an argumentation textbook, not a rules manual on fairness. Also, freely is not aware he was the director of debate and aided to that John Carroll and wrote the Christian argumentation advocacy when he passed away. David Steinberg updated his book to know about the evolution that happened in the debate in 2008 after a major criticism of the book. And we will debate at the time, including a whole chapter about the now Jewish life in the debate in 2013, proving that the process of debate means that the debate is not static. There are predictable limits and standards not applicable in the world where the norms are constantly changing in the first place. Also, there's 27 this is not office for them. It just says that we should be able to have a discussion about our affirmation as long as we can affirm the topic. We win this debate on the first place. Also, their dressing evidence is turned by our hooker evidence that I read above. Now, their gender letters also ignore the history of our positions political thought frameworks, like Muhammad Ali, who said that violence is done against from Asian bodies, but rather violence comes from the top-down structure of the political system, which is why we should rename and rework how the political system works in the first place. Now, also, we'll win on the fairness and crash and ground debate. The ground and crash debate will be decisively won by the affirmative. Let's make it clear the negative just wants us to read a plan text so they get their institutional policy making. This has a process kind of plans. Let's make this clear. They're not entitled to the ground. There are different ways to negative. Our negative can affirm, our negative can challenge, our affirmative via criticism, countermethod challenges to discourse. They get presumption, they get the status quo, and more. Also fairness. And it begs the question of fair for whom our fairness and debate is not unique institutional debate, marginalizing the forefronting racial discussions. Our negative strategy versus our affidavit most encompasses strategy based on this multiple growth. Our traditional teams proclaim unfairness when dominant white noise the debate become challenged. From liberation was unfair. What was unfair was having an uphill battle and challenging this in 2017. Also, the deliberation arguments are answered about by the ground debate. Now, their fourth sub-point about affirming the resolution misses the vote. We aren't saying that traditional debate prevents education, but our form of education is better than the negatives.
You good?
Yep.
How does affirming Afro-Asia solve your impact?
Right, once again, you said in cross-text that nothing we do in this debate actually has any spillover or bearing on the real world. Therefore, debate is about forefronting methods that scholars say will challenge certain impacts. So in the real world, yes, forefronting the method of Afro-Asia, which is solidarity of Asians in Black liberation struggle. The history lesson that I gave at the top of the TOC is how we solve our impacts because Mona hosted that challenges white supremacy.
Sure, so you just said that the debate should be about who creates the best method for challenging these things.
Well, not necessarily the case. You're negative, so you get presumption, you get the status quo. You can say current engagement is good, or you can
sure, it's about testing, right? How do we test?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so then what is the internal link then? Well, I've obviously misunderstood.
Right, so the ground debate, as I said above, is that the negative gets presumption, the negative gets the status quo, the negative gets to challenge our affirmative through criticism, and you can actually engage our affirmative by saying that our method is a bad idea, which is just what you said, which is just one of the multiple facets in which you can be negative and challenge our act.
Okay, why doesn't the topical version solve? Like, why is reading a plan the same thing as violence, but other norms in debate are not?
No, I'm not sure which, like, for example, what norms?
Speech time.
Speech time is a rule.
Reading disclosure, reading evidence. I mean, there's tons of norms that you adhere to. Why is reading a plan one?
Well, yeah, so the Hooker evidence, once again, in the 1AC that we read, says that the seemingly endless litany of dead Black bodies in the status quo makes it almost impossible for Black people to engage in that form of democracy that currently exists. Therefore, we need to remake democracy, reimagine democracy to allow for reason.
Okay, what's your reason why reading a plan can't do that?
Because that's top down and not grassroots, like Hooker says.
Okay, why is like what part of Hooker compares the two?
What do you mean? She says
Like,
that
is it comparative with macro and micro? Like, why is micro better?
So she's saying that any engagement for blacks within the democratic system or democratic code is like against everything that black people stand for because of the endless litany of dead black bodies in the status quo.
Okay, so do you just have to win that
Grassroots
uniqueness argument? Is that,
Yes.
Okay, is there anything else?
I mean, the whole app and all the rest of the 2SE.
Right, so keep going.
That's important. What's your question?
I asked why plan's bad, but other norms not.
It's not necessarily plan's bad, but black people specifically need a unique form of politics to embrace when challenging racial justice.
Right, exactly.
I can
Why
say
can't that be a
that-
plan text?
Because those plan texts is a top-down form of implementation.
Exactly.
Of
Why are
grassroots.
those bad?
Because that, once again, enforces the form of democracy that currently exists.
Okay, is that the
perpetuates violence against black
okay,
bodies.
is that the only reason?
There's also respectability politics.
Right.
Just said,
What does that mean?
Grassroots just said.
What is that?
Why should not have to
Respect-
change their behavior when challenging racism?
Okay, what about reading a plan changes behavior?
That's, if we don't embrace that behavior, that's changing our behavior. If we affirm Afro-Asia by releasing people, then you telling us to embrace that plan is a changing of our behavior.
Okay. Prep.
I was hoping it would be good.
It's 7:40.
It's just one card, so it's kind of split in the body.
Those go long.
My cousins when this fucking random stickers and shit.
I wouldn't feel bad that you were here anyway.
Framework. With an overview. Small. How small is it? 30 to 45 seconds.
Alright, we're getting issues with it.
Everybody's good.
Our vision of debate is a call for discussions about the resolution because it's a predictable stasis point for both teams in the debate. It's a call for conversation and dialogue. In Top County says we have to uphold deliberation as a productive mode of thought. It's the only thought of testing ideas and back and forth of debate that holds revolutionary potential. Debates bigger than any one person. It's the potential to solve existential threats that are challenging society like poverty, social justice, climate change, etc., which outweighs the outcome of your scope. Our vision of debate is style neutral in the sense that you can further resolution in any way that you desire, which frames a large portion of their offense. It means the topical version doesn't require you to take anything out of the 1AC, just add to the end point of your discussion. Is tied to the top. You could diplomatically engage over security and withdrawal of our military because national security planning is disembodied and results in violence against black bodies and imposes some idea of the U.S. as a savior. You could say that this racial gesture creates a moment of vulnerability that ruptures a fear of alterity. This would be consistent with the cave of imperialism and whiteness. Or you can engage China on its own anti-blackness and try to change its domestic politics and politicians who publicly fear a state of black migrants from Africa bring drugs, crime, and interracial marriage. This is supported by evidence showing 17 China's fear of black invasion bring drug time and interracial marriage. Politicians share their African security risk plunging to a local meeting control the government to strictly control the African people. The Chinese response to very well the African plans to apply some kind of repression force, policing, society, addressing discussion of the Chinese government health, promoting the exchange of law pursuit, economic partnership, that competition over inequalities, the development of trial balance, transaction, has limited nature of resources and exchange for infrastructure investment. They have to prove an intrinsic reason why advocating for the resolution for the purposes of a competitive debate round precludes any educational benefit. Otherwise, reading everything on the negative solves their offense. T doesn't posit that the USFG must be good, just that there's a debate to be had about whether or not a policy implementation could be good. Their policies direct attention away from structural and material conditions for action, which divorces discussions of means and ends for accomplishing institutional change, which further entrenches the status quo in terms of their offense, because it means that their theory breaks down into practice. If you think that pedagogy in the 1EC is valuable, you should vote negative to foster a model of debate that can actualize it. You need to redeem what talkality means. Not all of our T arguments are the same, which means that we're not excluding the Aff or saying that it shouldn't happen. Our argument is that we should engage the 1EC. Having a well-prepared opponent is good because it generates better discussions once you say, which is important for nuance in detail. Any link turns the case because we mean that they become infinite advocates that can rigorously defend their ideas outside the debate, which is a prerequisite to their consent because it's impossible to achieve liberation through a functional monologue. It also turns their terminal impact as debate without contest or challenge. It's the same logic of whiteness that one's preconceived notion without examination. Fairness must be an impact. Debate's a game of inches. Competitive research drives everything. The only reason we didn't do 40 hours a week in Congress is because we think that we can win. The threshold is low because debates are one loss at the margins. Both sides are obviously going for the ballot, which is proven by the fact that they disclosed a new Aff, followed other norms of debate, and adhere to speech times. Any other claims mean that it voted for voting Aff is bad faith. That denies respect to the negative by evading the argument, which turns exclusion. Their first argument was the hooker evidence. First, debate is not democracy or a form of politics, which means that reading a plan isn't uniquely what your hooker evidence advocates for. Deliberation over a point of mutual contestation is all our interpretation advocates for, and says that that's good for contestation and actualizes your theory, which means that we internally turn the hooker evidence. Second is that you can have a new politics and a new understanding of politics under our interpretation, because you only have to add a relation to the resolution so that we can debate you on that new form of politics. The slave DA, why is reading a plan uniquely the form of violent norms that they criticize? They've complied with other forms of norms within debate, which is proven by cross-text. There's no reason why the plan text is that unique form of violence that they're criticizing. It's obviously asinine to compare reading a plan text saying that the United States federal government should normatively doing something and saying it's the same as inflicting violence on slaves. They say bottom up is good. We don't preclude that. Our argument just says that you should advocate for the federal government doing that. You can do something like an individual ethical orientation toward anti-black violence. So the conclusion of that just has to be that the federal government should implement some policy to stop institutional violence. Their star evidence first. It's not about debate. It's about it's about black people adapting to abusive police violence, which obviously we don't agree with either. Second, we're not forcing you to adapt to our interpretation, but rather grounding your advocacy in some resolutional form is good for your advocacy. Third, you can adhere to other norms, which is impacted above. Fourth, this is the same argument as saying that you shouldn't adhere to RFD suggestions to make your argument better. Obviously, you have to adhere to some things to make your advocacy more effective, which is what our interpretation is. The counter-interpretation is more than just their app. It still links to our limits often. They can arbitrarily pick and choose any part of the topic to relate to, which opens the floodgates. Any identity category is multiple implied by every social ill in the way that the law and the military each foster that. Every race identity app is different. Critical race theory, end of the world, pragmatic analysis, race, gender, fugitivity, and Afrofuturism are each unique, and we can't just say race bad to them. Combine those with every flavor of IR criticisms like Foucault, and it becomes impossible to be negative. Even if it's close to the topic, negative dissent links radically change based on philosophical thinking before reducing or before engaging China. That's bad. First is it forces debate over stale generics. They monopolize negative preparation because they push us to say framework and cap, which are always a step ahead because we'll never have research the specifics of their argument, but they will have. They can easily wrap their want to see around answering those. Second, the negative force to defend polemics like anthro or capping, which explains everything. The role which loses to a permutation is also overly reductionist, which comes down to bad debates over whether or not humans or animals matter more rather than whether or not their advocacy is effective. Third, it's also a countereffective model for political training because it trains us to allow them to pick and choose what side they want to defend while wishing away politically relevant objectives. The we the people argument first is our interpretation is that the government is in DC. Second, obviously there's not one decisive and 100% true definition of what the federal government is. There are multiple definitions of literally any word in the English dictionary. Every single piece of offense that we're going for is a justification for our definition of the federal government. It's best because it's something that's equally grounded in the literature and both sides have accessible access to. What we as people do is not grounded in literature, which means that it inherently favors one side over the other, which links to our fairness on the engagement definition. Our only argument has an intent to define is in the context of foreign policy, which should be preferred, because that's what the resolution is. They say over limits, which is not true. The resolution allows for creativity, which is proven by things like new apps. The topical version uniquely proves that you can always attach things, and limits are better for creativity because it encourages you to think outside the box. Having no limits is necessarily worse because it means that you're not restrained by anything. Reasonability is arbitrarily infinitely aggressive, encourages judge intervention, and there's no guideline for evaluation. And the only competing interpretations creates the best standard for evaluation because it's objective. Usually USFG was answered above the resting argument argument that they challenge engagement. That's awesome. You should do it through a plain text because then we can engage you over whether or not that advocacy would be a good thing. To have topical version of that argument, there's no link to their king evidence. First is that we don't say your method is bad, but rather our model is better for actualizing change and deliberation about whether or not your method is the most effective way for actualizing change. Second, we don't say that we should put off radical change or not challenge white supremacy, which is what the king evidence in the context of line by line is of white. This is just an argument about the arbitrariness of what norms they determine to be violent or not. The counterproductivity conflates rejection of white masculine norms with the incorrect notion that all norms are white. Why is the plain text in the resolution bad? Some norms, like two-parter speaking and time limits, prevent male debaters, or the time limits prevent male debaters from dominating in male-female partnerships when silencing women, which is a good norm. Norms change because people challenge them. It's just new and better norms. What's their alternative to plain text? Now, they say violence comes from the top down. We agree with that, which means that you should change it through advocating for federal government change. They say we have other ground. Even if that's true, it's not necessarily the good ground. Our evidence says that it's a question of reactionary versus predictable ground. It's a question of who has a better interpretation of the topic. Just because we have some ground doesn't mean there's not a better debate to be had. The specific point of difference is key to quality, nuance, and depth ground. Their interpretation makes it unclear from the outside what the negative is supposed to even refute. What's the role of the negative under their interpretation? Whether they're just saying affirmation would be a good individual position to adopt. The judge's decision becomes increasingly arbitrary when debaters are reduced to more Wilderson versus anthropocentrism. They also force us to indefensible and discriminatory policies, which turns the pedagogical value of their argument. Presumptions always a bad argument that's not offensive, which means that they would just win at risk of offense. Defending the status quo is bad because it means we have to defend all of the anti-black violence happening now, which we've agreed with that's happening in the YC, which obviously forces the negative into indefensible positions. They concede the Anderson evidence. Our framework doesn't exclude any particular identity or the inevitability of difference, but accepting a topic where both sides have some chance to engage to a way to ensure that difference doesn't crack the foundations necessary for political engagement. Some minimal guidelines like a common resolution are key to habituate democratic processes of engagement with one's opponents, respect for the ability to equally prepare and willingness to consider the fallibility of one's positions and re-define your intellectual belief. Maintaining this process of exchange outweighs the substantive content of the 1AC discarded the resolution turns debate into a monologue which limits debate's unique potential for radical change because it can't be accessed anywhere else.
You good?
Yep.
What does adding a plain text do to make this debate so much better?
So our argument is that when you ground the act in the resolution, it enables us to determine whether or not your advocacy is a good thing.
Wait, how is the act not grounded in the resolution? The only thing that you're saying we're violating is USFG action. How are we not grounded in the resolution?
So like having a relation to China is worse than not being like about the resolution at all because it allows you to determine
But we have a relation to China.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Like, having a relation to China is not the same thing as being topical. Our argument is that having an advocacy of what the federal government should do is good.
What is saying,
equal access to that literature.
what like unique, amazing ground do you get if we say the USFG should do something? Give me an example.
What do you mean?
Like
we can
what
determine,
unique ground?
I don't know because I don't know what your plain text would be.
So then how do you know that we can just stick on the plain text where I
Because we can determine whether or not that advocacy is good for the change that you've outlined.
What is the difference? All you
So
get is a certain political dissent.
If you read an app that was like get rid of all military containment toward China, if we had a debate that was then like that causes a shift to economic containment, which is just as anti-black, then it becomes a debate of whether or not that advocacy is good for the impact
Right,
that
so
you outlined.
okay, I'll move on. Your framework seems like a one-size-fits-all approach. Why is reading a plain uniquely good for black people?
Wait, sorry, I didn't.
Your framework seems like a one-size-fits-all approach. Why is reading a
It's
plain
not
text
one
uniquely
side. Like
good?
not every app will be the same.
But you said everybody has to read a plan under your interpretation, so
Yes.
why is that uniquely good for black people?
The plan is 5 seconds of an 8-minute advocacy.
Why
we
is
don't
that?
determine what you can do with the rest of the 1AC. You can do anything you
You're not
want.
answering my question. Why is that uniquely good for black people?
I don't know.
Our argument is that
it's not
it's
good for like any one group in particular. It's good for debates.
That's our point. Okay. How do we
Wait,
challenge
no,
white supremacy through the top-down USFG when all of our evidence is about how those things are inextricably tied together?
What do you mean? What I just said, testing advocacy. That
If
is
the
good.
USFG is inextricably tied to white supremacy in the settler colonial
Saying the
state, how
USFG
do
should
you
do
use one
something
to solve
is
the other?
like very distinct from saying the USFG is good or justified.
Yes,
what
we
it's doing now.
understand that. You're like, I'm like here, you're back here. I'm saying, on the context of the USFG and solving for impacts like white supremacy, if those things are inextricably tied together, how do we use one to solve for the other?
The federal government, you don't, like the plan doesn't solve white supremacy. It's a
That's
question
what
of
I'm saying.
advocacy
Okay.
skills
Fairness
and
for
resolve
whom?
whether or not white supremacy can be resolved through political action.
Right, and they can't be. Fairness for whom?
Can have a debate.
Fairness for
The
debate?
equitable division.
We've
of
had
power
many,
in the
many,
African
many left-on-left debates, and we've lost a lot of Aff rounds, and we've won a lot of Aff rounds. Where is the side bias, and where is it unfair?
There's a side bias because one, it's not predictable, so engage the content of the app and it's not tied to the resolution.
But if the negative has
Second,
won
it's-
multiple debates on left-on-left debates, where is this unfairness?
Like, whether or not you've lost debates on the app before doesn't disprove the fact that your model debate inherently favors the app.
Okay, that's fine. Why is the rule of speech time the same as the norm of reading the plan?
What do you like? There are norms within debate. Arbitrarily picking which ones are violent and which ones you adhere to is like
How is it arbitrary?
Because plan texts aren't uniquely violent. Yet you just haven't met that.
It's not plan text, it's top-down implementation, but I'll move on. Why is defending current engagement a bad strat?
Because we have to defend the violence and the status quo. Like you said, there's so much anti-blackness.
So you're just gonna concede that argument? You're not even gonna challenge
There's obviously there's anti-black violence in the status quo. We're not gonna say that there's not. We're not gonna have to defend anti-black violence.
Case.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm starting on there.
So we're on case?
The overview first. Did everyone get the dog?
Just the cards and
Yeah. But yeah, that's sorry.
Is everybody ready?
Solidarity doesn't solve. They're having trouble at the internal link levels, which means you shouldn't grant them the impact calculus done here. Then also don't grant them the 1 or 2 impact calculus without an explanation of how they access their impact. They support that 2AC gives a history lesson very fast, so give the 2 hour leeway in answering any specifics that might not go answer. But most of the empirical examples that are cited in the 2AC are distinct from the Aff A sub point because this protest is within debate. None of those were within debate. B sub point is because race relations have changed since those things have occurred. Their explanation of how this is analogous to reading a plan and getting fiated impacts is a joke because you still have to win that plan solves something. There has to be some level of internal link explanation for why voting affirmative in this debate grants them access to all their international arguments that they're making. The line-by-line debate, the first argument he makes is that they're not making spillover claims. Please remember this come the 2AR because I don't want them to stand up and talk about all the international impacts they have. Voting affirmative does not solve the global impacts they talk about. None of their evidence is about protests within debate, which proves you can vote negative to vote affirmative. Their argument is that it's still a good idea to affirm. I answered this above when I talked about the fiated plan, etc. But remember that this was their only answer, which means if we win internal link defense, then you can vote negative on presumption. The ballot is key to none of their offense. You can vote negative and still agree with the protest and think that the protest happened, which solves 100% of their offense. This wasn't answered in the 2AC. Don't let them recover in the 1AR. The state phobia debate. The state phobia debate. The no link arguments don't make sense here because macro politics is key to solve warming. There's no explanation in the 2AC as to how the affirmative would be able, or how grassroots movements would be able to solve ecological disasters that our 1NC evidence talks about. Also, he tries to no link out of our progress argument. It's literally not just about life expectancy. They're reading maybe the first 4 lines of the card. The rest of it is very specific to race relations. That progress is good and has happened now, which disproves the uniqueness argument. That was their only reason why the plan was bad was because it was inaccessible. The uniqueness of card read in the 1NC says that is changing in the status quo, which means it's a good time to start creating new ways to engage macro politically that actually solve the problems that they're talking about. Our institutions good as a dissent to the case that you can vote negative on alone. The rejection of institutions causes widespread violence and cedes power to the neoliberal elite by refusing to engage in common deliberative contestation over government policy. They can't no link this because only talking about macro political solutions can solve the Anthropocene. That era of the Anthropocene has pushed humanity to the brink of 6 mass extinction. Coordination, regulation, and planning by institutional avenues are crucial to keep us under the tipping point. That's our own impairment evidence that perpetuates racism, horror, and climate change is an issue that's the dangerous race that causes people to cover low-income communities, discourse burdens, the common, the responsible African Americans, whatever affects health, housing, economic well-being, culture, and social media harm, the storm of climate warming, influence, nearly all existing inequalities, so global south global policies, also racial justice policy, domestic reductions, provide the greatest benefit of the global south, the 6 states with the African population expected to experience more intense weather resembling extreme. 71% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant, and asthma has strong association with pollution. African Americans have a 30% higher rate of asthma that also outweighs maximizing all lives. The only way to affirm equality, convincing United to promote discourse, but also equality, which dictates that some must give way for the sake of others. Respect requires that one give consideration to the unconditional value of beings, that one give equal respect to all beings. does not involve people doing so that can make commitments and requires them to commit to equal valuable beings in recognition that the moral subjects concerns do not have overriding importance. That they saw global discriminatory violence is not in the global discriminatory violence arguments. This is not true because they said debate does not spill over. To vote on this impact, you need to look at us in the face during the RFD and tell us how voting affirmative in this debate changes global racism. You need to articulate specifically why that voting affirmative and why advocating for their protest goes and spills over and solves these international violence, especially when the top of the 2AC made a very clear claim that they're not making a spillover argument. Is this on framework? Goal-oriented political change is compatible with the Appleton. The time my writings about reduction for exactness by liberal goal-oriented organized to free political person abolish industrial harm, right to resume tangible identifier results. I don't want to clarify the impact of my work, how political circulation and literature that not cause out becoming I've been involved with. You can start with macro politics. Since in the three African Americans that were the struggle and received that much. The struggle is concerned with the people walking up to use to respond positive about all weeks. Freedom fighters have no difficult to coalition fight. Those one work with freedom, everyone coalition really forgot what the United States people coalition capacity resist. What's first about coalition slowly to continue to been already delivered. The conference fight all way. The powers of the people look at our own costume and culture. I think it's easy to strengthen when we access there's not on the overlapping the patterns of oppression to go. There's no alternate white spirits, no collective organized, no efforts to build coalition across the understanding of all slaughter. The race politics and knowledge specific issues that simultaneous recognition that overlapping issues while inclusive understanding what's given the people of color and access was very the only way to ensure multicultural democracy will become reality.
How much do we have? 740. Can we close the door in the back? Thank you. So for the order, we'll do case, then the framework overview, then framework shakedown.
Other cards.
No. Anyone not ready? Everyone good?
This is solidarity that doesn't solve because the examples of the TOC are not debatable. We're saying that the way white supremacy works is by pitting different groups apart. We're saying that solidarity is able to resolve all of the TOC examples are things that people were able to do in the real world. Obviously, these didn't happen in debates, but the point of debate is to be able to model the type of methodologies we're able to create outside. They group all the spillover stuff. Obviously, nothing spills over except the skills that we're able to produce, not the actual methods. About creating different methodologies that we're able to think about how we're going to implement them in their lives. They say ballot not key, vote negative, vote out, but we're saying the ballot is an affirmation that you think our method is a good idea if implementable. That's vote negative, vote out doesn't do anything to resolve the two implications of what we said. There you go, state phobia debate. We're not state phobia because we've literally redefined ourselves as the United States federal government, which is the closest form of being allowed to get this state. And also their argument about how grassroots can't solve is literally asinine because all of our TOC examples are about how grassroots activism was able to advance powerful change. They group the progress arguments. Progress may have happened with the Aff is about formulating new forms of black politics for people to effectually change in different forms that are able to make different issues of anti-blackness better. They say rejection of institutions seeds power, but your model seeds power by divorcing us from the United States federal government, understanding us as we, some people, as the best form of being able to take over that power. They say warming causes racism, cool. Grassroots can solve that. Michael White's example of mental environmentalism is a grassroots movement that's able to resolve forms of warming. They say maximize life, but that does subscribe to a neutral definition of life, which we think doesn't count for people like clearly. They say goal interchange is possible. We are for a form of goal or interchange, just like all the TOC examples of Du Bois, Robert Williams, all of them. They say can start with macropolitics, but we critique macropolitics and said the best way to avoid democratic sacrifices through grassroots. I'll do that more on framework. Go to the overview. They say call for discussions of resolution, but we've discussed it. Not our fault. You didn't pull out the case snag that Tyler cut against Afterwation, which is contextual to this app. The only reason why we read this app is because we knew you had ground to it. They say top of the version of the app is a 217 card. First of all, doesn't solve things like democratic sacrifice. The fact that black people have to be forced to engage in state. Second of all, doesn't solve for Afterwation violence. The 217 card. I read this on Facebook last night. It says that there's a lack of contact between people to people, which only Afterwation is able to resolve. Not any form of governmental policy can resolve the issues of people not understanding each other. They say Gus institutional change, but they mishandle the whole question of how bottom up works by being able to influence how the institutions work by being able to start the ideas from the bottom. They say fairness and impact. First of all, they can see the whole base of evidence about fairness is not neutral because we live in a society in which democracy is unfair towards black people. Second of all, not our fault. You didn't do good forms of research. Go to affirmative proper. They conceded we, some people, as the United States federal government, don't let the 2 and R recover from this, give the 2 error leeway means we're able to effectuate change through our model of debate. You can frame the framing debate through our hooker evidence says black individuals white supremacy. We encourage black future thought, acting outside the strict legal implementations. You can extend that they say debates not democracy, then why do we need to democratically engage the state? They say can add new forms of politics with a plan, but our form is mutually exclusive with a plan because one democratic sacrifice and do the grassroots decide, which I'll do in a second. You can send the future slave back decide, which is framework that brings grassroots activists back to the limits of the plan. Texas like the slaves are brought back to the plantation. This precisely what recommends when chooses the protesters and unjust rules are automatically criminalized from deviating from white supremacy. You can also extend the grassroots decide here, which is our one see hooker evidence proves that framework nevertheless bottom-up solutions are key for black politics and the face of injustice. They say we should advocate USFG do the grassroots. That's literally a contradiction because USFG politics operate from the top down, which negates the value of bottom-up. You can also extend the respectability politics. This the star evidence teaches that blacks should not have to adapt or change their behavior when challenging racism within a system of white supremacy rules and norms in place that prevent true liberation. We must not be more respectable. They say they don't force us to adapt, like you've literally said we should aspire to a model that where when he reproduces democratic sacrifices to hooker evidence, and they say we must adhere to something, sure, but if we want to risk that adhering to something is racist, we should have to hide democratic sacrifice in places. You can send the counter-interpretations, the affirmative should radically reimagine American democracy in the USFG through the process of substantially increasing academic and diplomatic engagement within BRC. This occurs through Afro-Waste. Our interpretation doesn't include their vision of the topic because it seems to instill our top-down policy. Our monk evidence already anticipated the interpretation of the negative. C says scholars didn't focus on the three branches of the government, said the foundation of how these three branches work in active citizenry. That's probably better than the definition saying usually. And our authenticity evidence is Brown winner redefinition of engagement proves that their definitions are mere pieces of African currency evidence. The problem is that schools that we continue to confine ourselves down to realities that have been created before us and fail to construct a world we wish and imagine to live in. They make this argument about they say limits this head because we can pick any part of the resolution like other race acts. First of all, need to have solvency advocates removed within the resolution, which means we don't justify those race acts. Second of all, we only add one new act, which is the redefinition of the USFG because we still defend things like instrumental engagement. They also said that we never have the specifics, but you can't say this in debate where Tyler literally cut case like they say government in the DC, LOL usually. They say foreign policy is the resolution, but we've indicted that foreign policy said why it's bad. They say limits are key to creativity. When we add one new app, you can extend this argument about how we turn the resonant evidence because of the question about that reproduces forms of white supremacy. They say do it through blanches, but that's not responsive. Extend the affirmative for various debaters to be truly life-ready, which is not foreclosed by the negative. Not everyone become politicians, but everyone becomes citizens. Democracy is the way it should use debate to create more descriptive vision. Debate is both. We must account for the pluralistic nature of our community. That's their own time-working freely card. They say that they don't say the method is bad, but say our model is better, but you exclude our method. They on the ground debate that like you're not entitled to process counterplans or politics. This I need to prove why that outweighs the passage of the affirmative. They say better debates we had. Not our fault. You do not engage. They say defending school is bad, but you're supposed to defend school engagement, being able to say that's instrumental in being able to form a forward different policy. They tell us Anderson evidence about solve that excludes performative redefinitions. You can also extend our app as the rhetorical bridge between traditional policy debate. Our app and interpretation is reasonable and still firms US China engagement with the redefinition of democracy. And USFG competing interpretations cause a race to the bottom where teams eventually ignore the resolution because of web. How does it they get excluded?
That's fun. It's exactly what I wanted to do. I would do it for half of it. Like, I was like 10 years old.
Our interpretation is that debates be about the desirability of hypothetical topic government actions. There are three impacts versus procedural equity debates, inherently competitive activity that incentivizes participants to make strategic calculations, which is proven by the fact that they broke the new Aff, didn't disclose it, adhered to time constraints, had a chatting component to the Aff, and followed speech orders, which means competitive equity should be an a priori conserved to preserve procedural ground between the Aff and the neg. Debates are won and lost at the margins, which is a conceded framing question, which means that any skew is reason enough to vote negative. It internally turns the Aff, their model allows them to be insulated from contestation, which they concede is the same logic of whiteness that holds onto preconceived notions without challenging them. A sub-point is it means you also vote negative presumption. First, substance becomes irrelevant because we weren't prepared to have a discussion over the Aff. Second, you should be highly skeptical of their claim to embodiment of the form or their arguments or the form of their arguments because strategic motivations influence and shape them. They're tantamount to protests that didn't tell its participants what the protest was about, which means that they linked their offense just as much as we do. Second is intellectual testing. Debate over a specific point of difference actualizes opportunity cost assessment, learning strengths and weaknesses of different courses of action, implementation, jurisdiction, and how to persuade people that you don't agree with. That is key to create a capable citizenry, which uniquely turns their citizens' offense because we can challenge violence caused by globalization like racism, sexism, climate change, and poverty. It straight turns the Aff, which is offense for us. We're key to giving their theory praxis because negative flash allows better discussions over the commensurability of their advocacy and the effectiveness of their strategy. Absent that, they become impotent advocates in the face of well-prepared governmental opponents, which cause their movement to be shut down by institutional violence. Third, we're key to better discussions about anti-black violence that result in material change. They link to their line-by-line offense much worse than we do because they pigeonhole the negative into framework or overly reductionist theories like cap or anthro, which means debate becomes about who's more important, animals or humans, or what kind of violence is worth, capitalism or anti-blackness, rather than about the most effective strategies to dismantle anti-blackness. Our vision of debate doesn't exclude any of their offense. The topical version is the uniquest kind of how that results in a majority of it, even if they have a risk of a solid seat deficit. That high risk of external offense should be enough to outweigh that. It proves our model of debate still allows for ethical subject formation and for using the space to relate to institutional violence. They can read an Aff that extended military containment of China and say that that's a form of imperialism, anti-black violence that's rooted in fear of otherness, or they can say that we can have a debate about whether or not shifting to economic containment is worse than military containment. They can read an Aff that ends the U.S. and China's cooperative exploitation of Africa for resources. As soon as the evidence is that fear of Africa is rooted in a security threat of viewing them as not white. Every reason they give us a topical version fails proves our argument that they avoid clash because that should be negative ground that we could have had, but they avoid by crafting an Aff beyond the resolution, which makes those strategies uncompetitive and forces problematic root cause debates, which is impacted above. Even if the topical version doesn't solve, it just means they can read it on the negative. Most of their line-by-line offense is unwarranted assertions like we caused a democratic sacrifice, which isn't explained well. You shouldn't allow shoddy 1AR extrapolations of unexplained offense or new 20AR extrapolation of 2 hours already the hardest speech debate. They're going to go for the redefinitions of the word of the resolution, which solves none of our offense. At best, it proves there's multiple definitions of a single word. Cool. The impact debate determines which definition will you prefer, because that's the justification for that definition. Only talking about the federal government in DC solves our offense because debaters have equal access to the literature and prove that there's a relatively equal division of Aff and ground. Asking what he as people should do is not predictable, debatable, or valuable in the context of the activity. Our interpretation is different from forcing black people to engage the state, which answers their first line by letter. The Anderson evidence disputes exclusion. Some middle ground to common resolution are key to habituate democratic process engagement with one's opponents, respect for their ability to equally prepare, willingness to consider the fallibility of one's position, and willingness to refine one's intellectual belief. That's a key point of commonality, is a starting point that can effectively facilitate pluralistic exchange across the inevitably difference. Normatively saying the state should do something is not the same as justifying the state in every instance, or saying that the United States Federal Government is a good actor, which is proven by their arguments that say we can engage institutions, but we should just start from the bottom, which is what our interpretation is. They say they're bottom up. We're not bottom up. Fairness isn't neutral. Their argument is relying on fairness as anti-black violence that happens outside debate, and the difference between dividing Aff ground and net ground equally, which is distinct. The connect group, the next two arguments, the conceded people's arguments were answered above. DC is a predictable definition. It's also rooted in foreign policy. The impact is the justification. The democratic plantation arguments. First, if it's true, that means you're a bad fugitive, which takes out some degree of solvency because you told us that you're fugitives. Second, the plan isn't plantation. Winning this relies on them winning that plans are racist. The respectability dissent first is not about debate. It's about black people adapting to abuse of police violence, which we don't agree with either. This relies on them winning that plans are a white norm, which there's no difference to any other norm. The counter-interpretation is bad, and it's more than just one app. They can arbitrarily choose any topic they want to relate to, which over the flood creates any idea of category that's multiplied by every social ill. The model of debate is what they said, which means they have to do. They have to defend what they justify. Solvency advocates don't check. That's ridiculous. The Resnick argument, change it is what we're asking you to do, because you can say that foreign policy is vital. The process counterplans this engagement over specific strategy, which means it's not just politics, but rather whether or not your advocacy is a good thing. Committee interpretations was too early. He didn't make an argument, but reasonability is arbitrary. And only interpretations avoid the death of debate. The case debate, it doesn't leave the room. There's no disconnect between the impacts you talk about in debating in the quarterfinals of the TOC. Don't give them access to impacts. Any explanation of how their method solved is not an explanation of how debate spills over. The ballot being affirmative, the method doesn't make sense, where they don't have a reason why the ballot's key to any of their methods solved. Let there be some poetic justice and vote negative on the fact that they haven't answered vote negative to vote Aff. You can agree that protest the one to see and just assign McDonogh lost because they don't explain why the ballot is key to that affirmation of the protest. You just affirm that the protest happened and that it can be effective outside of debate, but this is still a good model of debate for other debates to happen.
I vote for the affirmative. I'll go first in case it may come down to the offense and the affirmative wins on this floor. That the impact is all the offense and the negative is going for. And the affirmative debate, this is very important in evaluating my decision, even if the negative wins all of the offense on that floor. That basically says that the affirmative needs a plan text or implementation for the small procedural impacts that the negative is going for. After Asia, in and of itself, is something that cannot be resolved through that hypothetical implementation, i.e. if I say that the affirmative has a time to read a plan text, but the negative concedes that rights from seeing USFG are inextricably tied together on the case, but I cannot look at the affirmative in the face at the end of this debate and say that a topical versus also creates a better discussion that they want to have in the first place. So we'll go to the framework debate here. The framework debate is also in the block for the negative with the concession of the moment piece of the affirmative wins and the USFG is we some people. This means that in a world where I'm evaluating competing interpretations, even if I agree with the negatives interpreted, the affirmative should say that the USFG should do something conceding. This definition of the USFG calls Damien the debate, even if I don't look at the USFG as we some people arguments, the most persuasive argument that's not answered by the negative is the accessibility argument that the affirmative is making via the whole group piece of evidence. I read this evidence and it says that the endlessly of dead by bodies and tactical make it impossible for blacks to engage in hypothetical endorsement of that top-down form of implementation of democracy, that blacks need a unique form of politics from bottom-up. Even if I give the negative all of the arguments in the framework for about the fairness and equitable ground limits and predictability if certain people cannot access this interpretation and the negative puts forth, then I have to reject the negative based on my ethical obligation. Also, the spillover argument and debate is a wash of the negative. The affirmative never claimed spillover, but rather my bound represents the method of affirmation is a good idea in the abstract in the real world, just like in any traditional debate. My bound isn't a bill, but it's the idea of should this happen in the real world. The only difference is that the affirmative impacts are systemic. This means that we do that the affirmative does get to access their impacts in the first place because they're actually saying that the affirmation is application to challenge white supremacy, and white supremacy is resolved through affirmation via the McDonogh evidence on the negatives of the interpretation so the should be about the government action. This is crucial when framing our decision because concession of our USFG definition means that we meet their interpretation. This should be a 2-second decision. They go for this equitable stuff about new affirmatives. One reading affirmation since can't they even cut a case tag to it. Also, new Fs are uniquely good or conceded in this debate. Also, shouldn't punish us because they didn't do the research in the first place. Saying new Fs should mean you should punish the affirmative because the negative didn't have a prepared strat to read in the first place. The debate is won or lost of the march. This was not conceded. This is not a reason or offensive reason to reject the affirmative. As long as we win, that we affirm the resolution. You ought to go to Aff. Once again, framework is saying that you should punish us for research that they lacked in the first place. The intellectual testing arguments are good, but there's also they can still test our affirmative through the pedagogical assumptions of the criticism of our affirmative. They can say that affirmation is a bad idea. They can defend current status quo engagement. They do not have to just concede that current engagement is in itself anti-bias. That's where the debate comes into place in the first place. They say you can vote negative on presumptions, but there's no reason to our affirmative is a method that has been historically proven via our solvency method. And also, if we solve our impacts, it's about the bound, about our form of the bound is about our form of methodology. They say that they are key to better discussions about anti-bias. How they ignore the research like our hooker evidence and our Afro-Asian McDonogh evidence that says that you cannot do these things through top-down policy implementation, which means that in a world where you go negative, you disavow all this research and ignore this research from the identity of the debate. Now they say that they have to force white people to engage in the state and that we don't have to justify the state in the first place. This is not our argument. Our hooker evidence says it's impossible for the black people to engage in the say that they can engage in a hypothetical notion of USFG policy action from the top down because of the endless need of dead by bodies in the status quo. They say that DC is predictable, but just because it's predictable doesn't mean it's the offense for them. Just because if we still affirm the resolution, that is a reason that the negative should have ground to actually challenge our affirmative. They say that plans are not a right norm. This is not our argument. Our argument that once again the hooker evidence says that black people have a unique ties to the topic, unique ties to democracy and the USFG as a whole, and that's where saying that we some people should engage is the reason why you should vote affirmative. They say that solvency advocates do not check. Yes, they do. Otherwise, they always lose on solvency. They say it's not just about the politics they said. And for us, it's kind of ways. Yes, it is. They think they are entitled to that ground, but rather, in left on left debate, there are unique new reasons to vote affirmative. Also, I can't vote on the TVA for a few reasons. One, McDonogh proves that the true evidence isolates and lack of cultural context as being why there's a racism in China, and I'm represented by the argument that operation was solved. And I also don't think that military containment running the exploitation of Africans Asia is good because the Africa has one operation through people-to-people contact. Two, I also agree that the TVA answered the hooker evidence, which forces democratic sacrifice for black debaters and buys them to a framework where they can perform as we redefine the USFG. Three, it was devastating when Damien couldn't tell McDonogh how the TVA solves for operation violence work high girly because McDonogh is winning them and the debate is a side of exclusion. I think including their unique performances challenge democratic sacrifice and operations violence is justified. Four, I don't think they can do the affirmative on the negative because the affirmative affirms engagement. Five, the affirmative is avoiding costs by saying that the TVA doesn't solve. They're just saying that your model precludes them from doing it in the first place. That's why we will win. Or I'm voting on the counter interpretation that affirmative should radically reimagine American democracy in the USFG through the process of substantially increasing their economic and or diplomatic engagement with the PRC that allows you to buy people who's out there. And they want that their intro excludes theirs, but negatives, but the negatives intro excludes the affirmative. This is key when the negative concedes that this only has our affirmative topic. So on the amendments debate, they can't win that because we don't expose them. It's also McDonogh wins on the internals of the hooker evidence, which indicates that white people are forced into democratic sacrifice and thus should be allowed to act outside of the rules, regardless of the consequences, which it takes out their framework argument because they said that they should be allowed to expand the margins of what is acceptable. The negative is forcing the affirmative to a model that forces white people to accept democratic sacrifice as a form of respectability politics that binds McDonogh to a framework that precludes the formative redefinition of the USFG as we some people, which is a reasonable standard. This is what the negative concedes and what we're going for that debate. We painted a clear vision of what the world looks like when you put affirmative and you vote negative, you exclude that interpretation.